So just want to introduce, so we have Joanna here. She's one of our senior directors of client service. She's also, I think, our first or second employee and has been at the company forever. So she was probably in some of the photos that you guys are seeing. And then we have Justin here, who is the VP of operations. Formerly was the VP of also CX. Then he's got jumped in and threw operations in as well for Seated. If you guys don't know Seated, probably some of you guys that live in New York do, and some of their other major markets, but really, really cool app that I'll let Justin tell you about. And we have been working with Seated for now 3.5 years. And so part of this session is to talk to you guys about how to scale your team, how to grow your team, and kind of how to institutionalize your team. And so Justin and Joanna are going to talk a little bit about how their story and Horatio came together, what we learned along the way, and kind of where we built it into today. So without that, I'll pass it over to Joanna and Justin.
Hello. All right, I hope everybody enjoyed lunch. As Alex said, we're going to be talking about how we scaled the business pretty quickly. In 2021, we were looking at our company growth plan, and we saw that from January to August, we were expecting rapid growth. And it was my responsibility to figure out how we were going to support that growth. And so we looked to Horatio to start that process. And the first piece of it was understanding how we were going to actually forecast. I knew that I needed to have finances buy-in at the beginning because I wasn't going to have time while we're actually training and onboarding all these team members to be going back and forth and negotiating on headcount. And so what we initially did, starting with the 5 associates that we had at the time, was looking back at the previous 6 months to see what the GMV was in each of those months, and then also what the inbound ticket volume was. And then from that, we were able to calculate a GMV to ticket ratio. And I was able to use that ratio for the upcoming 8 months that we were trying to scale and understand what the volume was going to be. So this is kind of the process that I went through. So as I said, I created the GMV to ticket ratio. And then I took that, divided the GMV forecast for every month by that ratio to get the overall expected workload. And then from that, I was able to calculate the number of hours that we were expecting, and then working really closely with Joanna and the workforce management team, looking at what the per hour output was going to be for each of our employees. And then with that, we were able to understand the number of people that we were going to need every month. And so once I went through that process internally, got finances buy-in on the methodology behind it, the next phase was going to Horatio and working out how do we figure out when these people need to work and what is the support structure that we need around that. And so I'll pass it to Joanna to talk kind of like what was going on internally and how we approached that.
Maybe just before that, I think your guys' use case it'd be interesting for people to get a full understanding for those that don't know Seated, what you guys do and kind of how we were able to help you support you. But I think that's a big piece of this first.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. So Seated is a consumer-facing app that drives restaurant demand. So you go into the app and you scroll through all the restaurants that we have, and you will see the % of your bill that you will get back based on the time and day that you're going to dine. So the restaurants fund all of this. They choose the reward amount that they want. They choose when they want to offer rewards. And so you go in the app, you find when you want to dine, where you want to dine, you tap on it, we make the reservation, and then you go dine as normal, and you can either upload a receipt or pay with a linked card, and you'll get that percentage back in the app to spend on gift cards, or you can do a cash credit directly back to your credit card. So the team handles inbound CX. We're handling some of the booking issues that come up, and then we're also handling escalated receipts where our automations don't have a high enough confidence for us to process those without human intervention.
So after Justin reaches out and he's telling me about his projections and how the team is going to grow, we leaned on heavily on the workforce team. We worked on staff and analysis, so we shared all the data with the team. And we got to look at those heat maps and see where those gaps were going to be so that we could be covered. And we were able to help out Justin also, like building those schedules for him and those shifts so that we made sure we were covered fully.
And one thing to just jump in and say is that we shared actually the full year forecast of what we thought headcount was going to be, so that not only we weren't planning month to month, we were able to create a long-term strategy, not only for how we were going to hire, but then also how we were going to continually scale, which I think is really important to kind of for the rest of the conversation.
And so we needed a structure to support this rapid growth. So this is the structure. It was very solid organizational structure, I would say. Amazing to have the support. And this was actually, I think, is part of the success of how this really happened, because we needed to keep our SLAs. And so this is how the team looked like. We had an TL for every 8 to 12 associates. We had team managers. We actually had 2 for every 2 to 4 teams. And then we had QA analyst, 5 to 7, QA manager, 5 to 7 people under their pods, and training manager.
And I think for us, understanding what those ratios should look like allowed us to tie everything back to the associates. So with that headcount forecast that I was able to create for how many people needed to work, we were then also able to work together on, okay, well, how many team leads do we need to hire? How many team managers are we going to need to add in? And so everything was based on the role of who they were going to be supporting. And so that just helped us understand what that scale looked like, not only at the associate level.
Yeah. And so a big part of this, of course, was the recruitment team. So we had given them a profile of what we needed. They truly understood it. And we were able to shorten that process. So onboarding someone 4-seated used to take 3 months. So we brought that down to 6 weeks. And we got recruitment team to help us shorten that timeline and make sure we got people onboarded on time.
Yeah. And I think within that onboarding time, what we were also looking at was, and I think it was you that brought this up to me, was that as you're thinking about the scaling, it's not when you're not hiring in the month that you need them. You have to understand what that onboarding timeline looks like so that you can then hire that number of weeks or months out so that they're actually contributing in a material way against the inbound volume, and that the rest of the team isn't getting overwhelmed. And so that way we were able to create this kind of continual structured growth that was at times wild, but also very stable for both us as the client and I think with the team as well.
Yeah, and some of these roles are just, we keep talking about it, like we have so much amazing talent. Some of them on a manager level, we brought in, right? Because they were new roles and we didn't have that many tenured people, but we had great associates that were able to grow from inside. So there was a tremendous growth coming from this team.
Yeah, we saw a lot of our CX associates moving into the QA analyst role, which was really great because they had already been on the front line. They'd been the ones interacting with our team or with our members. And so they knew where things could go awry. So they knew how to very quickly read through a conversation and pinpoint, this actually didn't quite meet expectations, or this didn't follow the SOP that we had set. This is a really good opportunity for us to go back and relook at that and make sure that we're focusing in on those specific areas. And so this kind of brings us into, now we had the forecast, we had the structure, we knew how many people we were going to need, we knew when we needed to hire them, and then it was really about resourcing the team. And so we broke this out into 2 specific ways, or just kind of thought processes. It's resourcing them professionally and then resourcing them socially. And so on the professional side, it was making sure that we had really robust documentation of absolutely everything that we expected them to do, and as many of the interactions that we expected them to come across in working with our members. And so not only did we develop that, but we also wanted to make sure that it was readily available to them and it was easy to search. And so I think we created a really cool kind of constant feedback loop where the QA team was in the queues, looking at what was going on, identifying the gaps in the associates' knowledge, and then they were taking that back to training and going, hey guys, this is where we see some opportunities for us to go back and retrain or to fill in some gaps that we might have missed during onboarding. And then training would take all that documentation. They put together these amazing training sessions, mixing in-person, kind of self-paced, and within that, we also built in quizzes, we built in case studies, role plays to make sure that the associates had not just gone through the training, but they really understood it, and that we could then count on them to be able to deliver that to our member. And then once we'd gone through all that amazing training, we would pass it back to management to then be giving that feedback, coaching the teams, working with them, making sure that that's not getting forgotten. And then it would go back into QA. And so it was this constant cycle that we ended up calling the Triforce. And I want to give a couple of shout outs because we have an amazing team. We've got Brian, who was one of the training managers. We also have Jorge, who was the other training manager, Ronell, who ran QA, and Lillian, who's the associate director at Seated. She was overseeing all of this. And honestly, it was seamless between our companies. Like, it truly is that they are our CX team. They are integrated in the company. We're getting their feedback. Like, I remember being in so many meetings with you, Brian, where you were like, well, this is actually how we want to do this from a theoretical perspective on training, and this is what I read as and recently in this webinar, or saw in this webinar. And it was really great to get that knowledge from them, and then we were able to develop a really deep trust in how we were going to approach this. And I think that is truly what allowed it to be successful. Because something I also forgot to say at the beginning is, like, not only were we trying to scale rapidly, but I had committed to our CEO that I would not allow SLAs to drop. And we had really aggressive SLAs. And so it wasn't just about, we need the butts in seats. We needed the quality to be there. We needed the answers to be correct. And we needed to be making our members feel special when they were interacting with our company. And then Horatio did an amazing job on, like, resourcing the team socially. And I think, Joanna, you can speak to that.
So it's part of our culture. And everybody that works with me knows this is the big part of me. I really see huge value in celebrating the team's wins, making sure, we're celebrating, their birthdays, the anniversaries, that we're making sure they're happy. And I remember Justin really didn't get it at the beginning.
It's true. I was like, we're so busy trying to scale this business. Do we really have time?
I'm like, yes.
To write a newsletter about non-business related things, about what people are doing outside of this?
Yeah. And then, right?
And Joanna was like, yes, Justin, we do. And it's important. And it's true. And I really think that that's almost what made the difference. There were so many great things that we did, but that is what kept the team motivated and focused. And, like, Lillian and I came down here, and the team they were under a lot of pressure. Like, there was a lot of work, and there was a lot to learn, but they were happy, and they were joyful, and they were playing music, and, like, when it got busy, it could have gotten really stressful. And instead, we tried to make it joyful.
Yeah. And then we have those recognition programs. So those were really nice, and you were able to participate in some of that.
Yeah, we actually had a celebration while we were there. We did shots of Brugal and had cake.
So those were great too. And they had team dinners as well that came from you guys. And so that was very special. So they all went out and had dinner. So, it creates team bonding. It creates them, loving their job, enjoying their everyday. It's truly important to us.
Yeah, and we also did it where there was individual prizes and then also sub-team based on the team lead, so that there was always a healthy competition, but it wasn't just about the individual, it was also about the bigger group. And that was really important for us as well, so that they were thinking bigger than themselves as they were coming across issues or trying to problem solve.
And Justin, you guys were scaling. I remember you kept sending the forecasts, and they were kind of getting bigger and bigger, kind of month over month. And I think one of the things that you really realized was we got to figure out a better way to onboard people much faster, train people much faster. I think it'd be great for everybody to hear about some of the initiatives that you partnered with the training team on for Seated University, because that was a big piece of saying, how do we get people knowledgeable faster, check their knowledge with the QA team, and help ramp a lot faster. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we deemed all of the training Seated University because it was very comprehensive. And so working with the training team, it was really getting into the nuts and bolts about where the team needed help and where we needed to support them more. And that was super important, not only from an assurance from like the QA side and seeing those results, but also in developing that trust between both of our teams. Because we, at this point, also had an onshore team. And so in building all of that out, we were ensuring that the Horatio team was really able to deliver at the same level of expertise as our onshore team, which was hugely beneficial for us. And not a lot of, 98% of the training came from Jorge and Brian. And they drove that because Ronell was able to identify with his team what we needed to be focusing on. And they were bringing that visibility and knowledge to our weekly meetings to tell me and to tell Lillian, this is where we need to focus, this is what we're seeing, and this is how it's impacting your member. And then I was able to take that information and bring it to leadership and to the whole company through our Voice of Member program and go, this is what's happening. This is how, this change in the app is impacting the team or impacting the member, and really just trying to bring that full circle and to create not only the feedback loop within the team, but also within the broader company. Yeah, so the question was, with Seated being a marketplace, how do we think about support across both sides? So for much of this particular time period, we were very much focused on the member side. Since then, we've now, as Alex alluded to, I went from being the head of CX to the head of ops. And so with that, I took over the restaurant side of our app. And so building those relationships, not only with the consumer, but also then thinking about the restaurant side. And so as we've built out the onshore team and the processes around that, we identified that there was a lot of opportunity for B2B support in addition to the B2C. And so now what we look at is we have a support team here at Horatio that supports the account managers in the US. So they take a lot of the repetitive questions that can't be handled by AI or chatbots. And also we're really trying to deliver on that relationship with those restaurants. And so the Horatio team handles a lot of that. And if they can't answer the specific question, or if the email exchange goes in a way that they're not comfortable or confident in handling independently, they'll either ask the AM to get involved and take over, or they'll problem solve together. And then the Horatio team member is able to do that for us as well. As we also took on the support of the restaurant team, there's restaurant ops, where we're creating profiles for them so that they show up correctly in our app. We are auditing information about their businesses. We're constantly trying to check to make sure that what we have is accurate. And so we also have those resources here as well. Again, when forecasting that, it all comes back to the data of how many rows in a spreadsheet of audit are they able to get done in a day? How many tickets are they able to handle, and being able to forecast that out in minutes and hours across the whole team is really enabled us to scale and to manage the workforce in a way that we're always just slightly ahead of where the company's growth is. Yeah, so we used Lessonly, and we specifically chose that because they have the in-training quizzes and case studies, and the team could record themselves responding to things. And so that gave us visibility into how the team was handling the cases or the issues, or how they were going to. And so then we could work with training to be like, hey, we need to adjust this, or we're seeing that there's a gap in understanding in this particular training. And then also that helped further develop the trust, because we were seeing what they were going to say, we were seeing how they were going to respond, and we were able to track progress through training and understanding. So one of the things that we developed to be able to graduate out of training was that you had to have a score above 90%. And so then with that, if they were falling behind or they were consistently not getting those high scores, we were able to see pretty early on if they were not going to be a right fit for our business. And so then that way we could reduce the pressure on training and the team leads of onboarding these team members in, and really focus on the talent that we knew was going to help us grow.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Looking at this trifecta loop, I can't stop to think about the conversations that I have with first-time outsourcers. When they think about outsourcing, they only think about associates. And it's an educational process to explain to them the importance of training and quality. And I'm happy that obviously you understand that. But can you just explain what is the difference between having an in-house QA and training versus what it is to have a Horatio QA and training team, and how those two work together? Because a lot of people think about outsourcing associates, and they think about what they think about is associates in the wild. Like, can you talk a little bit about the management structure and the importance of having that management structure?
For sure. I think the most important thing is that when you have QA and training sitting with the team, they're able to see firsthand where those issues are coming from, and they're able to give that training live, and they're developing relationships and understanding those trends of where each team member's development is and where we want to get them to. And so the difference of doing that with Horatio versus onshore is really the human aspect. Like, you have the team here, they're able to interact, build that bond, and they're going to be much more receptive to feedback when there's that relationship. And so we also did auditing and QA onshore to make sure that we were just gut checking, making sure that these numbers were right, making sure that we were able to give Brian, Jorge, and Ronell feedback on what we were seeing. But the biggest thing was that you kind of need training to sit with the team. They need to be there. They need to be like able to answer those questions in real time. Pull someone aside and be like, hey, I see that you're struggling with this. Let's chat. This is actually a way that you can improve this workflow, or this is a way that you can improve your response. And I think what Brian and Jorge set up was really beneficial, that they were onboarding asynchronously and in person in groups. And so that also allowed us to onboard much more quickly and much more effectively and get them in seat to where they were at 95% efficacy. And that's what drove our ability to reduce onboarding from 3 months to 6 weeks, which was a massive impact to our business, allowed us to be much leaner during the onboarding process, because one of the constraints is that I also had to stay within budget. And so, having someone in training for 3 months really makes it difficult to do that. So
Yeah. And also to maintain our SLAs, like having a training manager there available, somebody that's looking for where we need to improve, getting sure to make those refreshers, like they're not waiting to get the feedback, they're already on it. So I think it's truly valuable, and I think it's part of the success, as I said before. Definitely having that support team with all these, I think Seated is a true example of what a solid organizational structure should look like, and I think the numbers prove it.
thank you for that. The last thing I'll say is it's an early red flag if you have someone here. If you're trying to do it in your head office, like, everything's going to be delayed because you're not sitting with them, you're not hearing it. So I think that's another big thing, is like, you see the issues faster.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.